Okay, in our last video for Unit A, today what we're going to talk about is how do we save our files and what are the different file types that we will be using in this class in Photoshop. So at this point, if you still have your kind of ramshackly document that we made real quick, you're going to notice that up here on your File tab, remember we had named it Practice 1 when we first opened our new blank document. And then over here to the right, you have some file information, no big deal. And then over here you have this little star. That little star indicates to us that we have not saved this file yet, so we are going to do that right now. So we go up and do a file save, since it's the first time we've ever saved it before. And the thing that is going to happen is because of the fact that we have layers, okay, I'm going to pull this over here so we can talk about this. Do you see how we have different layers over here? I had mentioned layers in a previous video in Unit A, and we'll talk about them more as we go. But these layers over here, anytime that you have layers, Photoshop is going to assume that you want to save the document as a Photoshop file. And the reason that is because when you save as a Photoshop file, you get to keep your layers editable, meaning that you could go back and change any one of these layers as you saw fit. Okay. So what I want you to do is simply to practice putting it in our shared drive. Now, I am currently not at school while I'm recording this, so I don't have access to our shared drive. What you would want to do is go to, will this PC work? You'll scroll down to this PC and you'll find our drive, which is the shared drive, and you'll click into it, and then it should look like this if I kind of tried to set this up like it did. So if you click into the shared drive, you go down and find the SHS Yearbook, and then when you click into it, you should see your working pages. So in your working pages, remember we had you set up your different folders. Each one of you should have a folder with your name. And then when you click into that, you have those lessons and assignment folders. We're going to save it in our lessons, and then we're just going to make a Photoshop A folder so that we can keep things organized. So in your Photoshop A folder, we're just going to call it Practice 1 PSD, and that PSD is just the Photoshop file extension. And you can see right now that it's saved as a Photoshop file. So just go ahead and click Save, and that's fine. Just to ignore the Maximize Compatibility. And you'll notice that your little square went away. Now, like I said, most of the time, if you're working with layers, we want to save it as a Photoshop file. Now, with that being said, every time that you save a Photoshop files take up more space than JPEGs do. So we're actually going to practice saving this file also as a JPEG so that you can see the difference. So what we want to do is go File, Save As, and it should bring you automatically to that Photoshop A folder, which is in your Lessons folder. If it doesn't, just navigate back there, but it should. And then what we want to do is on the drop-down menu here where it says Format, we want to go down and choose the JPEG option. You don't need JPEG 2000, you don't need JPEG Stereo, just the plain old JPEG. Okay, click that, and you're going to see what happens. It says, it puts a little like warning triangle here, and it says, but this document has layers. Are you sure you want to save it as a JPEG? And we say yes, that's fine. We can just leave it as Practice 1. That's fine. We're going to click Save. And this little document will always pop up. For any yearbook pictures, you always want to make sure that your quality is as high as it'll go, so all the way up to 12, and that your format option is baseline standard. If it's progressive, just click back up here to baseline standard, make sure the quality is as high as it'll go, and then click OK. So what I want us to do now is we're going to actually close this document. And then what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our shared drive. So I have a little folder open down here. We actually don't want this. We're going to go to our shared drive, and we're going to go to SHS Yearbook, then we'll go to Working Pages, into your name, into your lessons, to Photoshop A, and you're going to see that you have two different files in there. So a JPEG will always show you a little thumbnail of what the image actually looks like, and then a Photoshop file will always just be the PS logo. It always looks like that. So to start off, let's open up our Photoshop file first. So I'm just going to double click on this, and that's going to open in Photoshop, and you will see the same image, looks the same. And if you go over to your layer panel, you're going to see that you have your 4 layers, or however many layers you have. If you have more than that, that's fine, but no big deal. You'll see your layers. Now what I want you to do is go back to that folder and double click on your JPEG. Your JPEG, of course, opens in your Windows Photo Viewer. Remember, what you can do is right click, open with, and then choose Photoshop. Now, if we look in the workspace, you're going to see that the picture looks exactly the same. However, if we move over to our layer panel, notice that we do not have any layers. A JPEG cannot hold layers. A JPEG flattens everything down into only one layer. So you'll see that we no longer have an individual layer for our text, and an individual layer for our shapes, and an individual layer for our background. Everything is together. That is the difference between saving as a JPEG and as a Photoshop file. And as we go through and work in the different units, you'll hear me say, this is the type of file you want to save as a Photoshop file. This is the type of file that you would want to save as a JPEG, because there are times where we want to use both. And so it's important that we recognize when those are. Okay, so that's the difference between those two. So you can go ahead and close down both of your images. You can close out of Photoshop, and we are done with our introductory basics for Photoshop. Oops. Oops, 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 oops.